Hello, welcome to Book Talk. I'm your host, Anthony Moirore. At Book Talk, we get to have an author come and tell us about his book or her book. And we are always having some interesting books to talk about and also interesting authors. Today's guest is quite an interesting guest, and you'll love the episode today. We are going to be talking about food allergies. It's an interesting topic, I know. So stay right here and let's welcome to the show our guest today, who is none other than Dr. Efka or Efka Seska. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show. So, Anthony Murray is incredible. He has such a kind heart. We were talking for a little bit before the show, and he's such a good person. And we also have joining with you today because we're outside. We had some technical difficulties with the lighting. We're also joined with a garbage truck in the background, but that's okay. Just sort of like,
No, leave all the rest. Leave the technical problems we had before. Leave the truck that is passing by. It's all garbage.
that's right.
It's all garbage. What we have right before us is what is important. Now,
Yes.
and it's
Exactly.
such a great an opportunity to be discussing about allergy, and then the garbage truck comes by.
Well, when you have food allergies, sometimes you
Mhm.
bring your food home and you're like, you read the ingredient list at the store and you're like, this is going to be fine. But
Mhm.
sometimes, like, there's multiple names for food, like milk, casein, for instance. And so you
Mhm.
go home, you bring out your trusty book, your trusty FPIES handbook, and you're like, oh, that food, the ingredient that my child's allergic to, that I'm allergic to, is in that food, and I just didn't know. So then you have to throw it in the garbage, and the garbage truck eventually comes by and takes the food. So it's appropriate.
Wow. And now today we are going to be tackling food allergies. And tell us, take us up. But before we go there, let's know a bit more of you. Who are you? Where are you? What do you do?
So, of course. Oh my goodness. So I am a family physician, board certified family physician here in lovely, blistering hot New Jersey right now. And I've been a physician for, gosh, decades. And I'm also an epidemiologist and a biostatistician. And I have all this other training. So I have a whole bunch of other degrees behind my name. But Dr. Evka works, or Eva Cesnek, MD. And
Mhm.
I have an interesting story in that this is a passion of mine to help families with what they're going through with their children. Because I was born in a communist country in Czechoslovakia, and my family escaped communism. And we almost died during that escape from Czechoslovakia into freedom, from
Mhm.
communism into freedom. And the family that came before us, they died, and they had little girls just like me, and their lives mean something. They should matter for something. And so as I grew up, I realized how important it was to be healthy, to be alive. And I'm trying to help families with a lot of the stuff that they're going through, which is stressful, because there's many parts of medicine that are broken. And if I can provide hope and help, like, I've done my job.
Mm. And that's what we need in the world in the present age. We need hope, and
Yeah.
especially now that doctor is bringing us hope and is talking about food. Now, many doctors like talking about medicine, but you're talking about food. We
Yeah.
really thank you for being a great hope for us today. Oh, we have another guest with us today.
We do. She's kind of shy. But we are talking about, since we are talking about foods, we might as well, and allergies, we might as well also talk about dogs, right? So my dog,
Now, when you're talking about food, be sure you're going to invite a lot of visitors and especially even on our show. So when the food is mentioned, I mean, all visitors are going to join us.
Yeah.
So, food and allergies. What is allergies? I mean, what do we mean when we talk about food allergies?
So your body has an immune system that fights
Mm-hmm.
off viruses and bacteria and parasites. And sometimes it looks at things that most of us might not necessarily think of as like a virus or a parasite or whatever, and develops an allergen to them. So it might take something like food, and the body might create an immune response to it. It might attack it, and you might wind up with an immune attack. And there's different kinds of immune attacks that you can have. There's ones that are IgE mediated, which means that there's these antibodies, these immune cells that go and they attack the food, and you wind up with symptoms like difficulty with breathing and rashes. These are times when people might be using things like EpiPen, especially if they're having difficulty breathing, to kind of bring that whole reaction down.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's other types of food allergies that don't have the antibody, that particular antibody response. They have a different immune system response. And they give you other symptoms. So you're going to get things like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, a lot of this gastrointestinal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the longest time, when we think about food allergies, when most people hear about food allergies, they think a lot about the ones where, like the peanuts, for instance, where a
Mm-hmm.
child or somebody has peanuts, and then they break out all over, and they have difficulty breathing, and they need medication, like a shot of epinephrine, for instance, to help stop that. And we forget that something that might be like, may appear like a stomach bug may actually be a food allergy.
Mm-hmm.
And especially if it happens over and over and over again. And the first couple of times, people might say, well, it can't be a food allergy because we forget about these other types. And that's why it's important to have a diary, because it can take a while to figure out, hey, this is what's going on. It's not infectious. Nobody else is getting sick. It may be a particular food.
Mm. Yeah, thank you for that intro, for that insight about food allergies. Now, your book is known as the FPIES Handbook.
Yes.
And when I saw it first, I say, oh, what are these pies about? I mean,
Right. Or fries. Why are we eating
pies.
fries?
Yeah, what is FPIES?
Sure. So, my book is really about all types of food allergies. I kind of go through all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But FPIES is a newer diagnosis. It's been around, I'm sure, for centuries, but the diagnosis itself just became newer, where people started to recognize it as an actual medical condition more recently.
Mm-hmm.
And my daughter had it when she was born, and it was stressful because, like, I'm a physician. I've been seeing patients for a long time, and even I initially was like not connecting the pieces, that my child's nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, the bloody stools, all the mucus, the difficulty gaining weight, those were all signs of a food allergy. Because she wasn't eating the common food allergens that you would consider to be like allergen inducing, like rice. Many people out there still think rice is a really not that allergenic, when in fact it can be.
Mm-hmm.
So I was stressed out about this condition that my daughter had, and the specialists were few and far between, and it was hard to see them, and a lot of doctors didn't know what it was about. And there was a research that was going on that was showing that it was more stressful to have a child with this condition than to have a child, for instance, with certain types of intestinal failure. Not to discount intestinal failure. Intestinal failure is hard, but this was pretty stressful. And like, what do I do in that way? In that case, like, do I deal with the stress just like everybody else and wait for these appointments, or do I become the change that I want to see in the world?
Mm-hmm.
And so the book was actually a collaboration of people, because sometimes when you have new conditions that doctors don't know that much about, you find a group of people who are all dealing with it, and you become your own family.
Mm.
It was another person, Joy Vines, who was in the group, and she's like, we have to get a book out there to help us. And I was like, yes, we do. We need to get a book out there. And so my non-author, non-writer, engineering physician self said, let's do this. And I read all the research out there, all of the articles, and create somebody that could help my child and everybody else too. And that would help that community.
Mm.
Nothing that brings families closer together than dealing with something that's really stressful and really hard. It gives us purpose.
Yeah, and the I mean the initials FPIES, in to someone who may be seeing it for the first time in simplified form, is the meaning. The meaning is
Sure, of course. So food, protein-induced enterocolitis syndrome. So let me explain all that, okay?
okay. Okay.
FPIES, food protein-induced enterocolitis syndrome, FPIES. So
Yeah.
food, food is like an ingredient. Like food could be like a milk or soy or wheat or rice or a whole bunch of food.
Mm-hmm.
Protein-induced means that the most likely this reaction is happening because the body is reacting to protein in food.
Mm-hmm.
So protein is like, they're like big Lego blocks
Mm.
made up of a whole bunch of amino acids or Legos that are used by the human body to carry out all these functions. And we need protein in food in order to like exist. And sometimes our body reacts to some of the proteins, and it has to be a particular protein. It has to be like that protein itself has to have a particular looking structure. So your body's not going to react to every protein that's out there, but it's going to react to ones that look like a specific Lego model. They have a specific look to them, and the body reacts to them. And then so protein-induced enterocolitis syndrome. So what is enterocolitis? Enterocolitis is an inflammation of your entire digestive tract.
Mm.
So inflammation that's further up in the digestive tract may give you nausea, vomiting. Inflammation that's further down the digestive tract it will give you stool symptoms, maybe perhaps difficulty gaining weight, maybe a bloody stool, mucus-filled stool, multiple stools a day, or sometimes constipation. But there's these abnormalities in your whole intestinal bowel function.
Mm. So that's FPIES. Now, is this reaction or this allergy? I mean, or this specific condition. What is there an age set that it's more prevalent, or is it just? I mean,
So that you're a very good question. FPIES can affect everybody. So you can develop it for the first time when you're an adult. I know of one person who developed it for the first time when she was like about to retire. But the majority of people who develop FPIES develop it as babies, children, and outgrow most of it, not all, but outgrow most of it as time goes on. And the age varies. So some people say, oh, if it's like a milk allergy, it could be 3 years, but it depends upon the study population. There's study populations to say that you're likely to outgrow when you're 1. There's other populations throughout the world where it's more like you're in your 6 or 7.
And how do I get diagnosed if someone or a child is going through some symptoms? How do we diagnose that is FPIES?
Right. Or how do we diagnose these non-IgE mediated food allergies, which don't use that antibody immune response I talked about? So it's hard. It's hard because I think the awareness needs to spread. And I'm glad we're having this talk. Because the first thing people might think of with their child is, oh, it's just a stomach bug. Babies get stomach bugs. Or babies vomit, right? So they spit up, which is like closing of stuff from their mouths, and then they vomit because of their immature immature digestive tract and that pyloric sphincter. And so they vomit. So you might think, oh, this is just normal behavior for a baby. But with FPIES, you are going to have more of a severe version of that. And as a parent, you might not even realize it's a severe version until afterwards or after the fact. And so you might have pallor, you might feel really sick, you might have digestive symptoms that aren't just vomiting. You also have like these different bowel movements that are frequent and bloody and full of snot. They're very mucus filled. And the thing that you have to look at is if your child is doing a lot of vomiting, keep a diary. What are you eating? If you're breastfeeding and it's a baby, what is the child eating? And then compare that to some of the known risks factors. Like some foods are higher risk of giving you FPIES or giving you these non-IgE food allergens. And I have a whole list of those in my book. So if you're noticing these symptoms, see if you can pinpoint it to the food. And see if you can pinpoint especially to some of the more higher risk foods.
Thank you for that. So for those who may be joining us right now, or those who get to listen to this episode after we are through, we are talking with Dr. Efka Cesnek. And we are covering her book, the FPIES Handbook. And it's quite an insight to those who may not be familiar with that terminology, or those who may be going through some allergies, but they don't know where to start. This is an important book that I encourage you to go and get and read. And as we keep moving, what's an experience that you've had, or maybe some stories that you've had where people have been misdiagnosed of FPIES?
Sure. So those are really good questions. And there are times when you might be going with your child to the doctor and to multiple times because your child keeps vomiting and they're crying a lot and they're having difficulty gaining weight and they have changes in their bowel movements. And the doctor might tell you, well, look at the problems, like as opposed to seeing the forest for the trees for the forest. They might say, well, they're having difficulty gaining weight, so why don't we we add to their formula, whether it's the baby's formula, why don't we add some rice to it to thicken it, and just continue feeding, and because we need to get that weight up. And if the food that the child is eating is giving them an allergic response, eating more of the food will just add to the allergic response, may worsen the allergic response. So the symptoms will get worse and the weight will not continue to rise. So that's an example. Another example is with like the rice. Sometimes you thicken food with rice thinking that will make a difference, and but in fact it can make the symptoms worse. Or watching when your young child is feeding and they're learning table foods, and they're like, there's a certain age where you're supposed to be introducing babies to food. They're supposed to get new tastes, new textures in their mouths, and like their oral teeth are developing, their oral movements are developing. They also need some of the practice with different kinds of food. And you might notice that your child has some of those foods and doesn't really seem to enjoy feeding, doesn't really seem to enjoy what they're doing, and feeding should be fun. And then you're also looking at then you also ask questions about how their bowels are doing, and are they having nausea or vomiting, like, or are they having bloody stools, and think that maybe the two are related and the two go together.
Mm.
We have our dog back, so I want to tell you a little story. Yay, the dog came back. So I want to tell you a little story about some food allergy prevention.
Mm-hmm.
So this is some of what may be contributing to whether or not we develop food allergies is what kind of microorganisms or what kind of bacteria are in our guts.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's like more ideal types of composition for your gut bacteria,
Mm-hmm.
and there's less ideal ones. And the individuals who have less of these ideal ones are more likely to develop the food allergies.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been studies of having a pet. Like, does having a pet, like does having a dog, help decrease the chances of some of these food allergies? And the thinking is it might.
Mm.
We also did studies of like people who lived next to cows and next to farms and spent a lot of time in those environments.
Mm-hmm.
And not just went there for work, but like the whole family lived next to the livestock. And
Mm-hmm.
also living so close to livestock seems to decrease your chances of developing some of these food allergies. And
Mm.
we're trying to figure out why and how. And some of that stuff can be tied right back to the microbiome and what kind of organisms are living in your digestive tract. Oh,
Mm.
as well as what else your body's having to fight against, right?
Mm.
Like some of
That's
this exposure to the livestock stuff.
that's quite interesting. And
Yeah.
and and now, since you tell us of that's a reducing risk factor, and what do we have some others? And maybe you could give us how to with it once someone who has already FPIES, who is experiencing FPIES.
Oh, sure.
So you can tell us how more of how to reduce the risk, and also maybe how to treat someone or to go about it if you're on your own.
So the reducing risk of food allergies is hard. We're just at the beginning. We're just at the infancy of figuring all of this out.
Mm-hmm.
I do talk about probiotics a lot, and sometimes having babies, uh, or even moms who are pregnant, take probiotics
Mm-hmm.
through foods, and there's different foods that have more of them. Kefir, uh, miso soup, sauerkraut, um, yogurt, or you can get them as pills. And there's research to show that if you give a baby specific probiotics, or even if you give the mom certain probiotics and the baby exclusively breastfeeds, you may have a decreased risk of developing these food allergies. And in fact, I have another book that's coming out, and it's I'll show it to you. It's the Colic Handbook. So the colic is another issue that we deal with as with young children, where they just cry and cry and cry
Mm-hmm.
for long periods of time.
Okay.
And can you possibly decrease the chances that a baby will develop colic? And you might through some use of probiotics. And there's whole research studies about that moms start probiotics early on,
Mm-hmm.
even while pregnant and continue to breastfeed, for instance. So the other way, so prevention, we're still figuring it all out. The studies are a little bit mixed, but we're figuring out, and hope that there's even more information I'll be coming, and I'll make sure to update my book as appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
The other way you prevent food allergies, and I wouldn't say, there's different types of prevention, right? So this isn't primary prevention, but another thing you can do is decrease what kind of symptoms you have with it. So if you have it while you're waiting for it to hopefully resolve, which a lot of food allergies do, not all, decrease your exposure to the food allergens.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't decrease your exposure, sometimes what people do is some immunotherapy, where
Okay.
they get lower tiny doses of the allergenic food over time, repeated exposure over a long period of time, and that then the body becomes tolerant. It gets
Mm.
used over
Mm.
time to be done in a systematic way, but it helps. Um, and then the other big thing is reducing exposure. And sometimes reducing exposure is hard because of what kind of effect it has on your lifestyle.
Mm.
So you don't have like even just going on vacation. Usually when people go on vacation, they eat out at restaurants of some sort. They don't bring all of their food with them. It's hard to keep all of it like cool in the car for long periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know how they're feeding you in the restaurants. And
Mm.
it helps if you carry around allergen cards, if you let everybody know in advance at the restaurant, because I've learned through my own child's experience that sometimes there's like restaurant owners whose children also have significant food allergies, and
Mm-hmm.
they're more happy to oblige and to make sure that everything's fine because they're dealing with the same thing and they understand the importance of it.
Mm.
Symptomatic treatment's also important, right? If you have symptoms, what do? Do you just let those symptoms continue on, and you don't want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So in the case of the nausea and the vomiting and the diarrhea, you can stop some of that in its tracks by giving medications like Zofran.
Mm.
And keeping someone hydrated, making sure they have enough oral fluids to be
Mm-hmm.
Zofran, Phenergan, is readily available in a lot of emergency departments. It's not readily available in every doctor's office. It's not readily available in every urgent care center, unfortunately. And not every doctor feels comfortable prescribing it to
Mm-hmm.
give to patients when families who are dealing with food allergies when they get home, which is kind of really interesting for me. Because if you have somebody who has the more commonly known food allergies with like the difficulty breathing and the rashes, then many doctors will prescribe EpiPen, and EpiPens and epinephrines available in a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully over time it changes so that the Phenergan is also available to help these families
Mm-hmm.
places as well, as well as at home.
Mm. Well, thank you for sharing all that with us. So those who are watching, those who get to listen, that's the FPIES Handbook by Dr. Eva Cesnek. And she's told us so much about it, but you're going to find out more once you get the book. I looked at it and also the other book that she introduced. How many other books have you written anyway?
Oh my goodness, we're under two different pen names. So all my pediatric stuff is under Dr. Eva Cesnek,
Mm-hmm.
and I have a whole bunch more to go. I think right now I have 5 books out, and there's more to continue, because medicine's broken in a lot of ways. I can see as a physician, right? I've been seeing patients forever, and I want to fix it, and I want to fix the parts that give families stress. Sometimes it's hard when you're in the doctor's office to have all your questions answered.
Mm-hmm.
And how nice it would be if some of the more stressful conditions had books which are cheaper than copays that someone could read right away to get general understanding,
Mm-hmm.
and something that's written in a way that like is easy to understand and hopefully is a little bit funny. Add some humor to my books to make them more understandable,
Oh,
because we're in a business of saving lives, right?
yeah, sure. So that's very good. So, and you said how can people reach you if they want to get connected with you or get your books?
Oh my goodness. So my books are on Amazon, but they may eventually be coming to a bookstore near you. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
I do house calls. Currently I'm accepting new patients here in New Jersey. I'll come to your house and I'll spend more
Mm-hmm.
time with you. And I do courses online about all these topics. So you can reach me on my website, evkamd.com.
Okay, that's very good. So the website again is www.fkamd.com and
That's right.
connect to Dr. Efka to learn more about allergies, to get the courses that she offers, or just only to connect with her because she's such a wonderful human being. Go to her website
I
and
know.
get
Hi.
to know her, get to
Probably
know
missed.
her, get to connect with her, and just chat. Yeah, so we really thank you for taking your time, Dr. Evka, to be on our show today and sharing with us all that you shared with us. But before you go, it's a custom on Book Place Media to hear some words from the author that we should always remember. What are your words?
Wait. Repeat that. What's the question?
Some words that we should always remember. Something good that we should always remember from Dr. Efka.
Oh my goodness. So one of my mottos is try to be the change that you want to see in the world. But one of the things that came out of my FPIES handbook, which I think will hopefully help people, is tell your story in whatever way you can. Just tell it. Some won't understand or will reject it, but many will be grateful. Then the most magical thing may happen. One by one, you will start to hear other voices whispering, "Me too." Your people will gather, and you will never again feel alone. This is your journey with whatever's going on with you and your child. And while in some ways it may be unique, in other ways, this journey has already been taken by others. Your new family, one who's experiencing similar things to what you do. Let's all get connected and help each other.
Wow, that's beautiful. Beautiful. And thank you very much for sharing. And once again, it's been such a wonderful episode. It's been such a great honor to have Dr. Efka on our show. And yes, remember to go and get the book, FPIES Handbook, and the other book that she displays there. And
It's really good, I think.
yeah, the handbook. Go and get it. Go and get all of them. Go and get all of them and connect also with her from the website that we are going to tag on the episode. And that's just about it for us today on this episode. I've been your host, Anthony Morore, and together with Dr. Efka, we are saying bye for now. Bye.
Bye.